Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. As you might know, sorry, I haven't been recording for a while. I decided the predictions were getting really stale, and I was just wondering what I wanted to do from there. And so I've decided to do a bit more of these narrative type videos. Um, so as you can see, I'm watching TS versus LGD in the background. And for those that might know, um, OMG play BLG in the next game, and I think OMG's story about if they could make worlds would be really interesting, and I think it'd be a cool story if they could make worlds. So we're just going to go through the team, talk about the team, we'll talk about the players, and then go through some potential counters, and just a Reddit narrative as well, and then just sort of sum up what I've talked about at the end. I hope you enjoy. Um, so we'll talk about Shanji first. We'll go from top to bottom. So Shanji is just generally looking really good. His Shyvana pick is really strong, and often teams feel the need to ban it against him. And given he has the most solo kills in the league, which is a really impressive feat when you've got players like the Shy. Um, I think that's for the top lane, right, rather than just general solo kills. But it might just be general solo kills, in which case it's even more impressive. But still, you've got insane players in the league, and he's doing way better than them in terms of solo kill and dominating the lane. And he still looks good in team fights, which is really rare for a player. Well, it's not incredibly rare, but it's somewhat rare for a player who is really sick in lane. Because prioritizing skills and the skills are slightly different. But and he rarely ints, unlike players like Vashai who are also really good, because he's playing on the edge, but at the moment he seems to be pulling it off really well and rarely overstepping what would be deemed as the edge. Um, he is really good on Gwen as well. He's got strong overall picks. He's good on GP, Gnar, Sejuani. He doesn't. I haven't seen him look bad in a comp where his team also hasn't played too well. Or like if his team's played well, I haven't seen him look bad in any of the comps that they've played. Whether that be the Enchanter, which they rarely play or don't play well, or whether that be a Enchanter support, sorry, or whether that's more of an engaged style comp where they look much better as a team. The only thing I would say is a bit of criticism of Shanji is sometimes he plays with a bit too much confidence with Aki, and they roam as a duo and take off a bit more than they really should, take on a bit of a more harder fight than they should when they're not as far in front of the game as they think they are and get caught out. But that's basically all I have to say about Shanji. So we'll move on to Aki in the jungle. I think Aki has the most imp potential of any player in this team. He looks the most out of sorts in the Enchanter support comps. And against TES in game one, he chased for a kill with Cold their support and completely abandoned Abel, the AD carry. One thing I would say is he looks good on pretty much every meta pick right now. Although he is quite often out jungled when he overextends with another player in his team, typically Cold or Shanji, but literally could have been any of the players because they just do it all the time. It's just a bad habit of the team. When he played Belveth, I think that was against top, right? I think that was against top. It didn't look particularly good. He didn't look particularly good on it, and he made some seriously weird mechanical decisions. Fucked up some combos, but he looked. It was a weird game for Belveth anyway, so I think we can sort of give him a bit of leeway and say perhaps it was just he was feeling a lot of pressure because it was a weird game and he should have been playing something else really. Um, yeah, Cream. Oh my god, his Silas is just beautiful. Cream Silas is just still insane. Um, he looks a little less strong on some of the other champions, but I still think he's one of the stronger mid lanes in the league. I'm not going to say like when I say stronger, I don't mean like he's top, but I mean he's definitely good enough to shit on most of the NA and EU mid laners. He's a very strong laner and he works quite well with the rest of the team. Particularly, one game I'm thinking of is when they picked Ashe support and they had 5 Ashe arrows in the mid in the early game. But he also just roams quite well with Aki. I mean, obviously I've been talking about them inting that, but he still does it fairly well and does it fairly consistently. Um, but yeah, I think his main strength is definitely in lane. He's a bit less dependable than Shanji. Um, Abel, he is really good on Samira and Aphelios. Sen is not a bad pick for him, but he's definitely more competent on the aggressive AD picks. He look on the aggressive AD picks. Honestly, I think he's probably one of the best AD carries in the league. I mean, probably a bit of hyperbole. I'm trying to think. There's definitely players that have higher peaks. like Scout has higher peaks. Oh my god, my brain. Doggo has higher peaks, and I'm not even listing the best players because my brain's for some reason going through a absolute mare. I can't think who the AD carry is for RNG right now for some reason. Oh, my brain. Um, but yeah, he's very good on his aggressive picks, but and definitely better than them on than the passive picks. One thing I would say is that sometimes he gets abandoned by his team when he plays aggressive, as I mentioned earlier in that game against Top, where Cold and Aki abandoned him. He's really good in in team fights, and I love seeing him pop off randomly in team fights. Like in the game one against TES, where he popped off on Samira and just saved the entire game for his team. Um, yeah, Cold, you guys know I'm a support fan. I am a support player. He is just so fucking sexy, especially on that Ashe support where he got 5 Ashe over mid in the early game, which is the only time OMG have picked Ashe since week 7 Springs 2022, which is the most I could be bothered to check. I couldn't really think about checking further, but it's probably even longer since they last played him, or since they last played Ashe, her. He's really strong on engaged supports, and he allows the rest of the team to play sort of as they want when he's on the engaged supports. Um, when he plays enchanted support, it's hard to see whether it's his fault or the fact that his team doesn't really play round enchanted supports as well. Um, they take they do tend to take random fights that they would win with an engaged support, but obviously they've got an enchanted support, so they're not going to win it, and they mess up mechanically. It's a bit interesting because they do have Jerry, who has played a lot of Lulu in LPL, and he literally came in to only play Lulu in LPL. But then I was like looking at that because that's like fairly interesting if he's just come in to play Lulu in the LPL, but he was playing engaged supports in the LDL. So like I don't get why they have him come in. They had him come in the past for enchant supports, which is probably why he doesn't play anymore. But still, yeah, it's a bit interesting, a bit weird. Um, Basically, counters to this team are picking a comp that encourages the enemy to take an enchanter support because they pick it even though they aren't really very good at it. So if you because they seem to have a decent draft idea on what to draft and what's best to draft theoretically, but they sometimes ignore like what they're good at playing, and just pick enchanter supports when they really shouldn't as a team. Um, Other than that, um, although yeah, it's worth mentioning though they do sometimes ignore like what is theoretically good and go with what they're good at. They just don't do it often enough for my mind. Um, Renata is a solid counter to them as well because they love to get early picks in team fights and just burst a player. So her bailout is pretty strong, especially if you can punish that aggression as a whole rather than just getting the like temporary extra health. Um, so yeah. Reddit narratives. I just think these are really interesting. I'm doing them in this video because I want OMG. I want to see OMG at Worlds. I don't think they will, but I'd love to see them. But people keep talking about the LPL bombing at Worlds consistently and how cringe it is that LPL is always overhyped. And one of the teams that they're talking about being overhyped at the moment being OMG, and how LCK rarely fails to make it out of groups. But like the LPL has insanely high ceilings, like as a region. Like the teams that get out of it are have insanely high ceilings, but their floor is just not quite enough sometimes to make it out of groups. And like people point towards like FPX as a sign that the region is massively overhyped, but they had a ton of issues outside the game, which you could see in the videos that he made on what was it called, Breaking Point? No, it wasn't Breaking Point. Make or Break, was that what it was called? The series that they did of all the teams, it was something like that, and you could see that they were just never going to make it out of groups. They just mentally weren't going to make it out of groups. Um, Also, um, like, what is the narrative that um LPL don't make it out of groups and LCK do? Because like, yes, LCK do make it out of groups, um, but like except for their first seed, they are just viewed once they get out of groups as being an easy 3-0. Like Gen G last year, okay, if they hadn't got, was it Fnatic, they'd have probably gotten beaten by any other second seed out of groups. Um, Also, um, then they played EDG. Both teams played like shit, and people are pointing to that as like, oh, they took game 5 against the 2021 champions, but like EDG just played like shit. Like it wasn't a good game. Like context behind the 3-2. Um, Also, with Hanwha Life that year, I don't think they'd have ever made it out of groups if Fnatic had upset and didn't have all the other issues around it. Um, and that would have been pretty embarrassing because you'd have failed to make it out of a group with Adam in it. Like, that is insanely shit. In terms of like what we can expect from OMG as to whether they make it out of groups, it's quite hard actually to see whether they will or not. Um, Personally, I think they definitely stand a chance. I mean, they're 7-7, which is a fairly decent record to have at the moment, and they've got 2 games against BLG and IG. I think the BLG game they've played today will be very, very difficult because BLG have definitely improved a lot from where they were in the past. But I think they'll beat IG quite comfortably. And I guess it goes down to game score. Which for them is currently 19-19 and an exact 50-50. So if they can 2-0 IG and get a 1-2 against Bilibili, I think they should be fairly safe. Like the game score is better than TTG, FPX, Bilibili, who are the teams that are really in contention for coming up past them. Although actually all they have to do is win one game and they can't get passed by Bilibili. So in all honesty, I think OMG are fairly safe. I think they're a very, very strong side. Um, I think realistically, they'll probably finish 8th, 9th, maybe 10th. I think 10th would be a worst case scenario in this league stage. In terms of playoffs, I think they can do anything. I think if they hit their ceiling, they can probably make it to the top 4 and then go through the gauntlet to qualify for Worlds. It's a bit unrealistic. Like I'm not denying that it is a bit unrealistic. I don't think they are actually better than V5, RNG, Top, JDG, EDG when they hit their ceiling, Weibo when they hit their ceiling. Maybe they are better than Weibo actually when they both hit their ceiling. But like, yeah, my point is I don't think I think they shouldn't make worlds. I think they're weaker than the teams that will make worlds from LPL. But like, if they do make it to worlds, they'll be very, very strong, and that's sort of the point of this video. Um, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give it a like and maybe subscribe. Um, I'm still looking at how I can make these visuals slightly better, and trying to look at the scripts or my notes less often because I do know I look quite often at my second monitor. Um, but it will be quite hard because I'm working a main job at the same time, and the people who like run it are complete shitheads. So we'll see. Um, But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. Feel free to give me any feedback if you didn't. Yeah, see you in the next one.